Today, I'm joined by Dr. Chris Aiken, a psychiatrist specializing in mood disorders and a provider at Cedar Oaks Clinic. He's also the co-author of the Depression and Bipolar Workbook and an expert in using lifestyle strategies to support mental health. In this interview, we'll dive into the antidepressant diet, a science-backed approach to using nutrition to enhance mood, balance brain chemistry, and support recovery. If you've ever wondered how food can play a role in mental health, you won't want to miss this.
Okay, Dr. Aiken, thank you so much for being here on Two Healing Minds. I really appreciate it. So, your work highlights the importance of nutrition in managing depression. So, can you explain how one's diet impacts brain chemistry and mood regulation?
Yes, I think we can all identify that if we've just had a cup of coffee in the morning, and that's going to make us more alert and energized and help our cognition and drive a bit. There's even a rewarding effect with coffee that gives us a slight euphoric feeling. But that is not at all what I'm talking about today when I talk about how diet affects depression. See, coffee has a direct chemical effect through caffeine. And you also know that if you keep using coffee, particularly at a high dose, and you stop, you're going to get a crash, you're going to feel terrible, you're going to have headaches, withdrawal problems. So that's more like a legitimate drug effect. And I'm not talking today about sugar highs or caffeine rushes. I'm talking about foods that actually nourish the brain with ingredients that it needs to operate well. And these are foods that our ancestors ate every day, hundreds of years ago. And we're either just not eating them today, like fish and nuts, we're not eating as much, or we're eating foods that are not familiar to our body and that are inflaming our body. When our body sees things it's not familiar with, it tries to fight them, it gets inflamed. So I'm talking about processed foods and those funny long chemicals that you see on the package. And all that inflammation is affecting the brain in negative ways, causing people to have brain fog, depression, and low motivation.
Okay, and so many people drink coffee on a daily basis, one, two, or three or more cups. And does it obviously make a difference if you just drink straight black coffee or you put the sugar, you put the cream and you load it with all these other artificial flavors?
Yeah,
So
that's
what are
a
the
great
benefits of
question.
just
Yeah.
straight coffee?
Yeah, let me take those one by one. First, just coffee itself. I'm not against coffee. I gave it a bad name there with the caffeine drug, but actually a little bit of caffeine does some good for depression. And we know that if you drink about a mug a day, so take your standard generic sized mug of coffee, or that
Mhm.
would be like a single medium sized espresso drink a day, like a cappuccino, that can be protective against depression. And but on the other hand, if people go beyond that, they tend to have higher rates of depression. So there's something there where coffee has a fine line. I'll contrast that though with tea. Now, I was a coffee drinker for many years, and as I read into this research, I thought, gosh, why am I drinking coffee? I don't even like it that much. It makes me kind of jittery and anxious. So I switched to tea based on this research I'm about to tell you about, and I feel much better. And the difference with tea is it has lower rate amount of caffeine, and it also has a lot of ingredients like L-theanine and flavanols, which improve brain function, reduce anxiety, improve sleep, reduce blood pressure. So balance out a lot of the effects of caffeine. And in head-to-head studies, while both caffeine, like from coffee, and tea improve your cognitive abilities, only tea has a lasting effect where people continue to show benefits days after they've stopped it. So
Mhm.
something building up there instead of a withdrawal. Whereas with caffeine, it only helps on the day that you take it. So tea has a more long lasting effect on the brain. To your other point with sugars and creams, cream, I don't think makes a big difference in brain function, but we do have studies showing that too much sugar is bad for the brain, just like it's bad for the heart. And switching to artificial sweeteners is even worse for the brain. In animal studies, that tends to worsen the hippocampus, the memory center of the brain.
Mhm.
And we see higher rates of depression when people drink artificial sweeteners as opposed to regular sugar or honey.
Okay, and do you have any particular teas that you would recommend? So if anyone that's experiencing severe anxiety and depression, they can replace their coffee.
Yes, here I'm just talking about the tea leaf. So everything I've said only applies to green and black teas, which both use the tea leaf. Sometimes it's white tea, but that's very rare. So not herbal teas, which use other ingredients. And matcha, by the way, is just crushed up green tea, and that's one of the strongest. So if you really like that strong punch, you're not able to give up your espresso every morning, then try a matcha drink. That might give you more of what you're looking for.
Yeah, there was also a coffee replacement. I forget what it's called, but it's to replace coffee.
Oh, fascinating. I haven't
Oh,
heard about that. I've heard
no,
about drinks that
what is it
kind of
called?
throw in some brain healthy ingredients like B vitamins and L-theanine into a coffee like drink. So I'm a little familiar with what you're talking about. As the ones I've looked into seem reasonable and they seem like they have reasonable ingredients in them.
Yeah, what is the main ingredient in those? I was just, for some reason, it just crossed my mind. I just forget what
Yeah,
it's
I don't know because
called.
I think there's a few different brands and I don't remember the name of the brand. But L-theanine would be something to watch for. That's an ingredient that sometimes patients take on its own, L-theanine in a capsule. And there's studies showing it helps anxiety, it might help sleep, and it's brain protective, but it's in tea. That's an extract of tea.
Okay. And actually, yeah, I think it's chicory root coffee. It was something
Oh,
in
chicory
the
root.
chicory
That
root.
yeah, that was I don't know if that has brain benefits. It might because it's a plant. But it was used in the Civil War by the South to replace coffee because they literally ran out of coffee, among many other
Okay.
things they ran out of. So if you go down to New Orleans, where I'm from, actually, they still serve chicory root coffee. It has a more licorice kind of bitter flavor to it. It's interesting.
Okay. And also, so what are some key nutrients you can share with people or dietary changes that you would recommend if they're going through depression right now? And how can they contribute to their well-being? Because most people, when they're going through depression, they're not thinking of, oh, I need to change my diet. They're suffering, they're in distress. They're more likely to think, how am I going to get out of this? I'm just going to grab the cookies, the ice cream, the junk food. I'm not going to be thinking about my diet.
Yes, those things are instantly rewarding. And I'll make a comment on that junk food and sugar because it does. Many patients tell me it makes them feel better and they can't stop it, like you just said.
Hmm.
Here's an interesting study. They've studied this many times, giving sugar to people. They do not feel better. It's fascinating. Like they measure their well being 15 minutes later, 32 hours later, and every time point after having sugar, people are more foggy and fatigued and less motivated. So basically, more depressed. So, what's going on there? And I'll tell you about a different kind of study. This is a little
Hmm.
gross. I'm sorry, but have studies where they give people sugar and they spit it out. And those people are sharper. They do a little better on some cognitive tests. So what's going on there is that when you swallow the sugar and digest it, it's inflammatory and it's changing your metabolic hormones in a way that's not good for your brain. So your body's a little, oh, this how to get so much sugar? I wasn't evolved for this amount. And but if you just taste it, it makes your dopamine surge a bit. And anything exciting in life, I'll tell you a similar study. They study doctors where half the doctors they just gave a box of chocolates and said, this is for you to have later because you're doing such a good job, just put it there and do your work.
Hmm.
The doctors didn't eat the chocolates, but just knowing that it was there, they did much better, more accurate diagnoses. So there is something about dopamine and pleasure, and I want to emphasize that pleasure, which you've alluded to there, and why people eat this junk food, pleasure is very important to recovery and very important to this diet. But the paradox of sugar is that it's giving us some rewarding, pleasurable sensation, which makes us keep eating it, even though 10 minutes after eating it, we actually feel worse. So let's be honest about how we feel on sugar. So this diet was developed in Australia and it's been tested at 4 different centers to verify that it works. It worked as well or better than psychotherapy for depression. And psychotherapy
Hmm.
is pretty powerful for depression. So I would put this diet, if you can make all these changes, in it, I think the strength of the effect is going to be as effective as an antidepressant or as psychotherapy. I'll tell you about a patient I saw who was on disability,
Hmm.
and nothing I did helped him, and he wouldn't go to psychotherapy because he said he had no motivation to do so. And he wasn't bothered by his depression. He was on disability. He's just living his day-to-day life. He wasn't asking for more help, but he was very depressed. In other words, he was so depressed that he wasn't even bothered by the depression, which is
Oh,
very
oh.
sad. So I
Mm.
had trouble helping him. And one day he walked in with a spring in his step, and he was all bright and talkative. And I said, what happened? What's different? He looked at me and he said, well, I gave up fast food 1 month ago. It's like,
Mhm.
wow. And that was the first thing that really alerted me to how powerful this can be. 10 years later, the studies came out, and I realized it is true. And I think his story tells us something important, is that you can probably get some really big benefits just by giving up fast food and processed food and sugary foods, but that's hard to do. So you're going to need
Mhm.
something to substitute it with. And I can go over the ingredients of the antidepressant diet. And what I'd advise your listeners to do is just think about it and find some ingredient that you like and eat more and more of that. You're going to fill yourself up with more of that, and there won't be as much room for the stuff that's. Now, this diet has no calorie counting. There's no foods that are completely restricted. We're just going to ask you to eat more of some foods and less of others.
Mhm.
And it does cause weight loss if that's your goal, but there's no calorie counting because it changes your metabolism, is how it causes weight gain. It's not very expensive. It actually costs less than processed foods. And it's not all or nothing. So you don't have to follow it all the way. If you follow it halfway, you'll still get benefit, just not as much, but you will get in benefit. And a key ingredient, like I said, should be pleasure. You ought to be enjoying your meals, not just doing this out of some kind of miserable dedication to the diet. And on that note, everybody's different, but for many people, one that's easy to start with is fruit,
Mhm.
because fruit is pleasurable for many people, and blueberries are the top brain fruit. They have a lot of positive brain ingredients like flavonols in them. There are about 6 studies where just having a handful, like a half a cup of blueberries a day, improved depression and concentration. So there's one where you don't have to go on the whole diet, just changing one ingredient, adding more blueberries, or if you don't like blueberries, probably other berries or citrus fruits can have similar benefit, adding them to
Interesting.
your diet.
Interesting. And also, just in case for people that have a hard time, because some people have a hard time just eating fruit on its own, just taking a handful of blueberries and eating it, is it okay, like, for them to mix it with oatmeal, mix it with yogurt, mix it with something so it makes it easier,
Yeah, definitely mix it
obviously?
up all you want. In I'm not going to be too picky in this diet about whether you get it fresh or frozen or organic or whatever.
Hmm.
None of that is in here. They made this diet easy for people with depression to follow. So oatmeal is actually on the diet as a real positive thing. And you can do steel cut oats, or you can just get quick oats, whatever you want.
Hmm.
And when it comes to fruit, the only thing that's a little less effective is fruit juice. So I'll talk about two things where the form of the food might have washed out many of the positive brain ingredients.
Hmm.
Actually, three things. That is fruit juice. That's when you've washed out all the fiber, and so you're getting too much of the sugar.
Hmm.
There's white bread. So in this diet, we're going to prefer 100% whole wheat, because refined grains or white bread, I shouldn't call it white bread because sometimes white can be whole grain, but as
Hmm.
opposed to whole grains, having it refined sounds so nice, but really
Yeah.
refined just means that they stripped away many parts of the grain that
Hmm.
have the vitamins and the proteins and the fibers that are helpful to health. And the third one is olive oil. Olive oil is one of our healthiest oils. And in this diet, we're going to prefer extra virgin olive oil, because the other kind of olive oil, regular olive oil, has stripped away many of the antioxidants. And One paradox I learned about in studying this diet is people often say you can't stir fry or cook with olive oil, extra virgin
Oh,
olive
that's
oil.
right. That's something that I
You have
heard. It
to
says don't use
just
it for
use it
cooking.
for, yeah, they say just use it for your salad. But that's actually, it's actually the opposite. When I looked at the
Mhm.
studies, because the extra virgin has the extra anti-inflammatories, those anti-inflammatories also protect against unwanted molecular breakdown in the cooking process. So actually, of all the oils they studied, extra virgin had less unwanted breakdown from cooking, and you can cook up to 450 degrees with it. So most of your cooking processes can be done with extra virgin olive oil. If you
Oh,
want to go higher than 450, then I'd go with avocado oil.
okay. Well, that's good to know because people have the misconception, like I did, like it's not good to be cooking with extra virgin olive oil. Use
Yeah,
avocado oil instead. But as you
that's
said,
right.
if it's under a
At
certain
the super
amount,
high dose.
a,
Yeah,
a
but like
degree.
for cooking eggs, I'll cook them in extra virgin olive oil. I'll cook everything in that now.
Okay, good. So you did recommend, as far as dietary changes, is both adding a lot of fruit or that's something that you said that's easy that somebody can
Fruit
do,
is
implement
a
right
good first
away.
step, you know. Yeah, it's a good first step. Nuts maybe too, or for some people are easy first step. Well, let me just walk through the whole diet real quick, and then we can focus on individual ingredients and the fine gradations between them. What we're going to do is divide the foods that you eat into eat more of this.
Hmm.
That's eat as much as you want. Like there's no harm in eating too many carrots. Just eat more of this stuff.
Oh,
Eat in moderation, which is these are all going to be foods like eggs that if you Google are eggs healthy, half the sites are going to tell you they're not healthy, and half the sites are going to tell you they are healthy. So what do? You just eat them in moderation because they have some health benefits and some risks. And then we're going to have the eat less of. And the eat less of category includes processed and fast foods and sugary foods. These are things that have no identifiable health benefits and only health harms. They sure are rewarding and sweet and salty and crunchy and all that. You can have like 2 or 3 small servings a week of these, and it's going to do no real harm like that. So you can do very little. Yeah, think of it like bringing dirty shoes into your house, muddy
hmm.
shoes. You do that now and then, no big deal. You wash your house, you're fine. But imagine if your kids are running muddy shoes into your house every 6 hours. You'll never be able to keep that place clean. And that's what's really going on here. Your body
Hmm.
has windshield washers, it has cleaners that will clean out the gunk. Your liver does a lot of that. It's just you can't overload the system by eating that stuff every 6 hours. It can't keep up with it.
Yes, that makes sense. And also for people that love to eat eggs, there's always the concern with the high cholesterol. Do I just eat the egg yolk or do I only eat the egg white? So do they have to
Yeah,
take in
good
that into
point.
consideration depending
On
on
this diet,
them?
they
Yeah.
allow 6 eggs a week, which is almost one a day. That's not so bad. On this diet, we're going to recommend that if you have any other health conditions like high cholesterol, then just follow this diet on top of it. So that would mean eat the eggs, but not the yolk, if that's what your doctor recommends, or diabetes. So you just impose any other dietary, like if you're gluten free, just do gluten low gluten alternatives to all these foods. But you can still follow the diet if you have another health problem. I'll walk you through then. Those are the 3 buckets, and here's what's in
Mhm.
the buckets. So in the eat more of this, enjoy it, and eat as much as you want, we're going to put fruit, nuts, seeds, and olives, vegetables, 100% whole grains. That can be breads or crackers, any grains,
Mhm.
rice, brown rice, um, beans, any kind of beans, and extra virgin olive oil, and fish, particularly oily fish like salmon, are really good for the brain. All right, then we got eat in moderation. And here we're going to put chicken, poultry like duck, and lean red meats,
Mhm.
eggs, and dairy. And basically, to keep it simple, about 1 serving of meat, either lean red meat or chicken, and 1 egg and 1 serving of dairy a day are about totally reasonable to have given the balance. And then we have the eat less of. And we want to eat less of fried foods, fast foods, processed foods. That's the ones with lots of chemicals on them. Sodas, including diet sodas, sweets. That's any kind of desserty thing with a lot of sugar in it, including artificial sweeteners. Simple carbs. So that's going to be refined flours like pasta that's not whole grain, bread that's not whole grain, bacon and sausage and deli meats. So these are kind of processed meats, is the problem there. And condiments. Now, the
Mhm.
condiments, I think mustard is pretty healthy, so it kind of varies. But the problem is that a lot of condiments in the grocery store shelf just have a lot of processing and unhealthy ingredients in them. So we're talking barbecue, mayo, these types of sauces.
Ketchup.
But and if you're a smart shopper, you could find some of those versions with low sugar, low salt,
Mhm.
and low processing. That would be healthier. Well,
Okay.
that's all the ingredients right there. So there's the whole diet, and um, we we can talk more about how to shift to those ingredients because you don't have to give up all pleasures in life. For example, homemade popcorn is a whole grain, so that's
Mhm.
one of my favorite snacks. Is you take
Oh
a
yeah.
bag of popcorn
That's what I like
kernels.
too.
Yeah, you cook them in a
Oh,
big stove pot with the lid on it for and I use extra virgin olive oil for it, and just put a little olive oil on some of the popcorn kernels, wait till they start popping, and let it go. So that it look can put a little salt on it, or even better, put your favorite herbs on it. And that's like a eat more of that. Like there, you don't have to feel bad at all about eating popcorn. That's actually a whole grain that's good for you. The whole grain category was the hardest for me to figure out because there's so much deceptive advertising out there where they say made with whole grains, contains whole grains, or um, multi-grain. Multi-grain just means it has a lot of different grains. They're not whole grains. So those are not what we're looking for. We're looking for something that's 100% whole grain.
mhm.
So the first ingredient on the package after water should have the word whole in it. And every grain, from rice to corn to barley and wheat, comes in a whole form. The whole form is just the more natural form, as opposed to having all the good stuff stripped away. So a lot of products these days will have a little yellow box on it, a box with a image of yellowish wheat, and it says 100% whole grain, the Whole Grain Council. That's one of the more reliable labels to look for there. And you can get any starchy product, bread, crackers, pasta, rice, in a whole grain form if you shop wisely.
Okay, so it seems like there's just a lot of options for the antidepressant diet. And also, because there's a lot of people that fit into different groups, like there's vegetarians, there's vegans, there's people that have gluten-free diet, pescatarians. There's so many different. Is there one kind that may be more deficient than another category as far as an, does it, I was going to call it antidepressant diet? Like for instance,
Hmm.
if you're a pescatarian, they eat fish. That's good for you.
Yes, yes.
What do you think? Is there one group that would be more
Yeah.
deficient?
So the vegetarian diet is going to possibly be deficient in iron, vitamin D, some B vitamins, something called choline, which is essential for brain function and is heavy duty in eggs. We find it in eggs. Maybe even omega 3s, unless they're eating fish, or a lot of green vegetables have omega 3s, green leafy vegetables, and kiwis, some fruits have omega 3s. Seaweed, definitely. So, they may or may not be. If you're a vegetarian, I'd recommend talking with your primary care doc about getting some basic vitamins tested and seeing if it'd be wise for you to supplement with a multivitamin. Um, but I think that the wonderful thing about people who are on those diets is often they're avoiding processed and fried and fast foods, unless they're the kind of vegetarian who only eats French fries. And I will mention, I said vegetables are good on this diet.
Hmm.
The simple potato, unfortunately, is not so good.
Oh,
That's
no
just
fries.
does yeah, it doesn't have much nutrients in it. The sweet potato does. So
Oh,
the sweet potato is rich in nutrients, but our poor simple potato, um, and uh, it's sad, but because I love them, but
yeah.
one food that shows a higher you don't live as long the more you eat it is French fries, and
Oh.
we see the opposite with nuts. The more nuts people eat, they've done studies from a handful a week to a handful a day, and the more they eat, the longer they live. And let's go over how to pick some of those foods. Like, I've told you what to eat, but then how do you know what to buy? And the
Yeah.
basic answer is simple: is to try to look for products that are low in processing, so few chemicals on the list, low in salt, and low in sugar. And so when you get nuts, you want to try to get low salt or no salt,
Hmm.
and not have so much like chocolate and sugar thrown onto it.
And I was thinking, but sweet potato fries is healthy, right? Because I usually use that as an alternative
All
to
right,
regular
now you're onto
fries.
something. Now you're cooking with gas. So here's a great healthy version of fast food that I do a lot. You take the sweet potato, or you could take purple potato. That's, purple, kind of like the blueberry. It has similar ingredients. Slice it up, rub it through extra virgin olive oil, just rub it on there, sprinkle a little salt, and bake it on a sheet at 450 degrees for maybe 10 or 20 minutes until it's how you like it. And it tastes just like French fries. And you basically
Hmm.
roasted the potato. You've not fried it. You've used the right oil. So that's a totally healthy ingredient. Oh, it makes my mouth water just to talk about it
Yeah,
right now.
exactly. Because I was like saying
And
that's a
then,
perfect option for people that love French fries. Sweet potato
yeah.
fries is just as delicious. So, and I'm
And you
sure
can
there's
pair it
low
with
salt ketchups, right? Low salt or healthier version
yeah,
if you
that's
want to use
right.
ketchup.
Low sugar ketchups I've seen. Yeah, I love to dip them in vinegar. Actually, vinegar is a condiment that's totally healthy, so I'll do that. But maybe not everybody likes that. And then I'm going to pair it with a 100% whole grain bun. I'm going to make a hamburger with the fries. Can't have the fries without the hamburger.
Oh.
I like Dave's brand. When I look at Dave's packaging, he's got the rock guitar. There's not many artificial ingredients in it, and most of his stuff, he has a lot of 100% whole grains, and I think it tastes good. So I get the Dave's bun. Then I'm going to get lean meat, and I'm going
Hmm.
to grill it in a pan in extra virgin olive oil, and then I'm going to put a whole lot of vegetables on it. So purple onions, the more colorful the vegetables, the
Hmm.
better. Bright red tomatoes, and some whole grain mustard on it, and I'll leave off the cheese. We're going to try to minimize dairy in this diet, but you can put a little cheese on if you want. And if I do get cheese, I'm going to try to get a really flavorful cheese, so I can just use a little bit of it and pop more flavor out of a little bit. And there you've got your hamburger and fries. So some lettuce, dark green
Hmm.
leafy stuff is really good for the brain. So I might put spinach or arugula on this healthy hamburger. Now you got your hamburger and fries, and practically all the ingredients are on the eat more of it. Just the lean
Hmm.
red meat is once a day. Everything else is eat more of it.
And what do you recommend, like, okay, for vegetarians again, or with people that don't eat red meat? There's like Beyond Burgers,
Mm-hmm.
Beyond
Oh
Meat. What do
yeah.
you think of that brand?
My and there's been a lot of, not a lot, but there's been some research into the health risks and benefits of that stuff. And I think the bottom line is when you eat those, what do you call them? Well, veggie burgers basically,
Veggie,
but
yes.
they seem to have gotten very sophisticated these days, the
Mm-hmm.
Beyond Meat. When you eat that stuff, you're probably helping the planet, so reducing carbon emissions from animal stock, and you might be helping your own health a little bit, not a lot, because the downside of them is they have more processing. So while they have healthy ingredients, and this is confusing, I was confused by this. You'll find some snack foods like, ooh, some chips. I'm blank. Sun something. Do you know the brand? It's like Sun,
Sun
Sun,
chips?
Sun. Yeah, Sun
I've
Chips.
seen
Thank
sun
you. Yeah, Sun
chips.
Chips. Okay. So Sun Chips are very interesting to me because they're 100% whole grain, and indeed they are. And so why can't we just eat Sun Chips all day and Beyond Meat burgers? The answer is that they're highly processed.
Mhm.
And processing means two things. One, that they've added ingredients that are not familiar to your body and are going to make you inflamed. Two, that they've taken normal ingredients that are familiar to you, like wheat in the Sun Chips or beans in these veggie burgers, and they've modified them through um, various technological processing, drying them and I don't know what they do to them in the factories, but they're basically no longer recognizable to their original form. Even though the original form was like a pure potato or a pure tomato, it's now unrecognizably different and not familiar to our bodies. So that can have some inflammatory properties. So that's why more processing is bad. And I think it's a trend we've only really picked up on in the last 15 years, that the more processing a food has, the more health risks. Largely, we're worried about cancer, but indeed depression too, it's going to have.
Okay, and so you did actually share earlier about your research and findings to demonstrate a clear connection between nutrition and people struggling with depression. And you said in the US, we're kind of limited on studies for that. It's mostly on drug-based
Yes.
studies, right?
Yeah,
Pharmaceuticals.
that's right. And it's I really learned a lesson about how our information system works through that, because I mentioned these studies were done in Australia, some were done in Canada. I don't think any of these studies I referred to were done in the US that I recall. However, in the US, they developed a similar diet, almost identical, called the MIND diet. And it was
Mhm.
developed to prevent dementia, which it did seem to do in some studies, not all. So maybe it works, but it got a lot of press. I saw many books about it. US News rated it the number 2 diet in the country for health. It's really a modified Mediterranean diet, which is what this is. So we were getting all this press on that. And then when this other diet came out and it had even better evidence to treat depression than the Mind diet does to prevent dementia, I thought, why is there no press? I only saw one newspaper story about it. And the reason is it was developed in another country, Australia. They
Mhm.
don't have PR firms at their university that are going to reach out to American media. So it got buried in the research literature. They did publish a book on it, but it was only published in Australia. So it
Yeah.
really hasn't trickled out. The only doctor I know in America who's promoting it, besides myself, is Drew Ramsey, who's written some wonderful books on it and has a practice where he does this with his patients.
Okay, interesting. That's
So
something
slow to pick
probably,
up. Yeah.
well, hopefully there's going to be more in the future other than just pharmaceutical drugs for helping with mental health, more on
Yes, I hope so.
other alternative approaches.
Yeah, and other
And
countries value that a lot more. I'll say Australia definitely does a lot more research on that, and England does.
also the last question, Dr. Aiken. Many people struggle. I mean, dietary changes are so difficult for most people, especially when you're going through depression. You know, you just want the easy choices. What practical tips or small steps can people take today to include their mood boosting foods in daily routine, other than the handful of blueberries every day? You can start easily. What's a
Yes, or
couple of
a
other
handful of
tips?
nuts.
Or
Yeah, so
nuts, nuts.
I do bring that up because now and then they'll do studies where they just try one ingredient, like let's just give people a whole grain bread every day and see if they get better, have them, and usually these don't work. So it seems to be you need a little bit bigger change. But the two ingredients where I have seen benefit just with one ingredient change are eating the blueberries and eating a quarter cup, so like a handful of nuts every day. And there's not like one best nut. Another interesting thing about this diet is, when we think about medicine, we think about we want to give you the one best medicine, not like 10 different medicines. But in this diet, variety is the key. So try to stretch out and incorporate more variety. Don't just eat blueberries all the time, but try to mix it up with different things, because everything has something your body and your brain might need. Now, back to your question of getting started and keeping going with it, there's lots of tips on my website, chrisaikenmd.com. Has a lot of lifestyle stuff. And if you do / antidepressant diet, you'll go right there to a little booklet to get you started. It's a free booklet. And in there, I talk about one thing a lot of people struggle with when they shift to this diet is they start to crave those highly rewarding calorie dense, sugar high foods. And here's some tips for preventing sugar cravings. It is simply the most effective thing to do is to add in healthy oils. Healthy fats. Healthy fats will give you more solid fullness and reduce those sugar cravings. So, what are healthy fats? Well, they are nuts, seeds, coconut, so dried coconut, olives, hummus, yogurt without sugar added in it, of course, avocado, and oily fish like salmon, also tofu, and extra virgin olive oil. So dipping whole grain bread and so these are some ideas. If you can eat more of that, you're going to have less of the sugar cravings.
And
But
I
I'll tell you a
think,
positive thing.
uh-huh.
Most people tell me that their sugar cravings go away after about a week or two.
Mhm.
And then they tell me if they stop sugar, they have greater they're cognitively more clear, they're sharper, and their senses are sharper, like they can hear things and see things better than before.
Oh, and one important thing, I'm sure it's with a lot of people, they love chocolate. And you've heard studies of
Mhm.
dark chocolate. It's a mood lifter.
It
What do you think
is.
about dark chocolate every day? Well, I
I'm
mean, oat
fine
milk
with that.
chocolate.
Okay, do you mind if we cheat a little here? We're going to go outside the study because the study did not address chocolate, and I was disappointed in that because I think they just lumped chocolate in with all the things that you ought to avoid.
Uh,
But I know of lots of studies where a little bit of dark chocolate, we're talking like if, Dove makes those dark chocolates that are like little squares, just a little square every day, people have less depression. And we're talking generally 70% dark and above. So
mhm.
on the darker side, we don't know why they have less depression, but we know that it contains a lot of flavonols that protect important areas of the brain. And we know it's pleasurable. And just having more pleasure in your life tends to help against depression as well. So many possibilities there. But low sugar, high darkness, the 70% high cocoa content is, I think, a totally reasonable thing to add to this diet.
Okay, Dr. Aiken, I'm definitely going to leave your information below, and I appreciate it that you were able to share this information with everyone. And thank you so much for taking
You're
time out for
welcome.
this discussion. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Great to meet with you today. And let me kind of share one more tip with
Oh,
people.
yeah, 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 absolutely. No, no, no
Okay.
problem.
Um, or the
More
next
tips, the
advance in
better.
diet. Yes, the next advance in diet for depression is probiotics. And so probiotic rich foods like
Mhm,
kefir drinks and kimchi and pickled foods, these are all positive. Probiotic rich yogurt, these are all positive for mental health. And I'd encourage more of those, or taking a probiotic even. That's going to be the next step. We're already seeing some studies coming in showing us that. And then, as for me, I took on this diet myself just because I wanted to know how to follow it. And I'll tell you, once I started it, I couldn't get off it. So that is a risk. And the
mhm,
reason I can't get off it is because I just feel worse if I stop. If I go and have a lot of fried chicken sandwiches, which I love, and I feel so bad because my body's not used to it anymore. So your body might get, say, not as used to digesting that foreign stuff that you should never have eaten to begin with,
mhm.
um, and you end up sticking with it. So don't start it unless you plan to stick with it. It's going to be hard to shift back to the other stuff. But one thing that's hard for me to do, because I go to the grocery store like everybody else and I see these foods that look so healthy and I don't know if they really are. So much misleading product information. There's a great free app you can use called Open Food Facts. And you just scan the barcode and it'll give you a score as to how healthy all of these packaged foods are. And I very proudly found one that got an A rating. It
Mhm.
was Ezekiel bread, and Ezekiel cereals. Ezekiel make these sprouted grain, whole grain products that are very healthy, but it's hard to get things that find an A. So maybe just a B is good enough there on their rating system.
Okay, good. Again, thank you so much. And this is definitely useful for everyone for
Thank you, Tanya. Good to
antidepressant
meet you
diet.
today.
Bye, thank
Bye
you.
bye.